This is the personal audio diary of Lucy Oliver, detective, coroner, journalist. I have seen many strange things in my young years. It's one of the reasons I do what I do. I find interest in the strange and gruesome. I have been assigned many cases during my career as a coroner and a detective, ranging from heart attacks to serial killers to suicides. However, it wasn't until the past 2 years that I have gotten some out-of-the-ordinary cases. Cases that if I were to talk about them anywhere else, I would disappear. This is my way to tell those stories. This is my journal. Entry 1. The Black-Haired Jane Doe. May 28th, 2020. There have been many Jane Doe cases in the office. They're a lot more common than they should be, about 20 each week. I took on this case because I thought it would be easy. Just a quick exam and I can get the hell out of there. This woman was about 5 foot, with olive skin dulled by death and long black hair. She was wearing a purple flowy dress, almost like a bridesmaid dress. No shoes, and there wasn't a mark on her body that I could see. But when my colleague and I removed her dress to prepare her for the exam, I saw that she had several cauterized wounds on her abdomen, like someone sliced her open and then closed the wounds as a form of torture. There were also several bruises along her stomach, chest, hips, and thighs.
Damn, I wasn't expecting that. They really did a number on her, didn't they?
Clearly. Let's just get this over with. This seemed pretty straightforward, so the exam was just a formality at this point. They say not to speak ill of the dead, but we've seen so many Jane Does that day, and it was the end of our shift. So, we had little to no patience. We quickly laid out our tools, turned on the recording, and I got to work. I estimated the time of death to be about 15:35, so 3 hours ago. I started off with basic procedure, performing the Y incision as I had done countless times. However, when I made the first incision, no blood poured from the cut. This body was fresh enough to where blood should have poured out, but there wasn't any. Not thinking much of it, we continued to extract the organs.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
My colleague Jazz said after taking samples. I glanced at the open chest cavity. It looks like there's something in the stomach, I tell her. Let's open it up. I sliced the stomach open to examine the contents and was instantly hit with the most foul stench I have ever smelled. It smelled like rancid alcohol, and I could see what looked like the remains of white pills. I resisted the urge to plug my nose and take a sample of the putrid substance.
Oh, God, why?
Jazz exclaimed.
Oh, well, now we know the cause of death.
Overdose, I said, starting to feel nauseous from the smell. Or at least, that's what it seems like from the amount of pills in here.
But you've got something else in mind. What is it?
I point to the cauterized wounds in the cadaver's flesh. Don't you find it odd that she has these marks, and that there's no blood in the body, and alcohol and pills in her stomach? Something is not adding up. We finish the autopsy and close the cadaver. We follow an old procedure of tying a bell to one of the toes to make sure they're actually dead, the head doctor says. I personally think she's out of her mind, but I digress. I slide the cadaver into the morgue freezer and clean off the equipment. While I clean and disinfect the bone saw, Jazz strikes up a conversation.
I know you, Lucy. This is bothering you. Just tell me what you're thinking.
Jazz, do you remember what I told you about first impressions?
That they can be correct, but sometimes aren't?
Exactly. We thought that this case was an overdose at first, yeah? She nods. But I pointed out those marks. She nods again.
And there's no blood in the body?
Not a drop.
You think there's more to this?
I know there's more to it.
Lucy.
I cut her off. Think about it, Jazz. How often does our office come across a corpse without blood, and with cauterized wounds? And not to mention, there is both alcohol and pills in the stomach. And the pills weren't even broken down that much. If the victim was alive when they were taken, they would have been digested. Jazz looked at me like I was crazy.
Maybe she took more pills before those ones and they were the ones that killed her?
Even then, these ones would have still been digested because the stomach acid would have still been active. Jazz paused. I could tell she was trying to come up with another logical solution for this, but she could see where I was going.
Huh. You think this was a murder?
There's nothing else I can think of. But it's late, and the boss isn't going to let us work overtime again. Jazz scoffed.
Greedy bitch! I know she's keeping that money for herself. We should report her or something.
And risk our jobs? Not this time. I need to keep up with my rent. Jazz sighed.
Landlord, again?
Always. My landlord insisted I pay extra for rent since
You have the money. You can pay extra.
I did have the money, but I was saving to get out of this shit city. Despite the name, is the worst of the worst, with its only redeeming feature being the college I went to. I intended to stay in the dorms and then move back home once I finished out my education. Then the pandemic hit. Everything shut down, and I was forced into a shitty apartment, not able to pay for anything other than rent, utilities, and my other bills. Food was almost non-existent in my world. Thankfully, Mrs. H, the nice old lady who lives in the apartment across from me, always brings a meal or two. I swear that woman is a saint.
Ugh, son of a bitch! You really should move to a better place.
Jazz said. If only it were that easy. I finished sterilizing the tools and putting them away. I'm barely able to save a few cents on every paycheck.
You could move in with me and Alex.
As much as I would love to, I don't want to invade your space. Jazz gave me a sad smile. She's been trying to get me to move in with her and her partner so I have a better place to live.
Well, the offer still stands. Just give us a bit of warning if you agree.
All right, I said, knowing I likely wasn't going to do it. I really didn't want to invade, and I was fine where I was anyway, even if my landlord was an ass. We clocked out and stepped into the cool night, waving goodbye. Jazz reminded me once again about her offer, and I half-heartedly assured her that I would consider it. I unlocked my truck and climbed into the driver's seat. I turned it on, and remembering at the last second to put on my seatbelt. Glancing back at the window of my office, I saw one of the lights were still on, and a shadow of a person limping around. Must be the boss, I thought, as she was the only one I knew who had a limp like that. Thinking nothing of it, I pulled out of the parking lot and drove back to my shitty apartment. May 29th, 2020. I barely dodged my landlord heading out of my apartment the next day. I knew he was going to ask for my rent, but I didn't get my paycheck yet, and I knew he would evict me if I didn't cough up the money when he asked. So, I did what anyone with a shitty landlord would do, and I went out the fire escape to avoid him. After one trip to a fast food restaurant to get a $3 breakfast sandwich, I fought the morning traffic to the coroner's office. Right away, I was called into my boss's office. "You wanted to see me?" I asked as I entered her office.
Yes, Oliver. Have a seat.
She said sharply, a poor attempt at intimidation. "What's going on, doctor?"
There was a break-in last night, and we're trying to find out who left the door unlocked.
I stared at her puzzled. A break-in? There aren't any cops outside. Wouldn't the police be here if there was one?
I know what I saw.
She spat. And I don't. So, tell me what happened. She sat up and handed me a bunch of photos of the morgue. It looked like a war zone. Tables thrown everywhere, cold corpses scattered about, tools on the floor, doors to the freezers open. It was a mess. "What the fuck?" I started.
Language, Oliver.
My boss stopped me. Who did this?
That's what I want to know. You were the last in the morgue, and I can only assume you didn't lock it.
And I didn't have a key. Dr. Rich was the last to leave, so he had it. It was his responsibility to lock up, not mine. Those are your policies after all. My boss looked at me like I had 9 heads.
Policies change, Oliver.
This one didn't. And if it did, I wasn't aware. Now, are you going to continue this or are we going to move on? She took a deep breath.
Fine. I should fire you for this.
You won't. Not after the bullshit that happened on the other side of the department. And you know I'm one of the better coroners in this office.
I know. You're also the best detective the police department has ever seen. Can't afford to lose you.
Now tell me what actually happened. She goes on to explain that the cameras picked up on someone running around the morgue and knocking everything over. This person was small and quick, so the camera never picked up on their face, but it did pick up on white clothes and a mess of black hair. What the hell?
Oliver, this could cause an uproar if the media found out. We need to figure this out now.
I nod and leave the office to investigate the morgue. It was just like the photos showed, but I could feel in my gut that something was off. I wandered around a bit, careful not to trip over any of the bodies that were still on the floor. "Hey!" I yelled at one of the interns. "Why haven't the bodies been put back into the freezer?" He froze.
Um, it it's a crime scene, ma'am.
"I don't care. Get those bodies back into the freezers before they start to smell." He immediately scurries off to get the bodies put away. As he was moving one, I caught sight of a dirty footprint. Someone was walking around barefoot in here. Someone who was outside. I bolted and quickly ran around to see if any of the windows had been broken. Sure enough, one had been. There wasn't any glass on the floor, so the window was broken from the inside, which means that this was broken as a diversion. Whoever did this wasn't thinking, was very sloppy, and clearly didn't have a plan. I look and see dirty footprints on the floor leading to the window and followed them to one of the freezers where they stopped. This one was the only one that was still closed. Oh God, I thought to myself. Don't tell me they were stupid enough to... I didn't finish that thought. When I opened the freezer door, my eye fell on the Jane Doe I examined the other day. There was dirt on the bottoms of her feet, a thick layer of it, like she had walked through the mud on a rainy day and it dried. I rolled my eyes. Okay, which one of you twisted assholes is playing a prank? Everyone looked at me, some with confusion, others with fear, few with a mix of both. The intern I spoke to earlier timidly approached.
Uh, Doctor? What are you talking about?
There wasn't a break-in. Someone is playing a prank and I don't like it. Fess up now before you lose your job. They all spoke at once, either trying to defend themselves, accuse someone, or criticize me for threatening their job. Shut up! They all went silent. Since no one wants to talk, I will find out who it was, and they will be out of here faster than you can say jackrabbit. I storm out of there and head back to my boss's office, scaring a couple more interns as I stomped down the hall. I threw my boss's door open. There wasn't a break-in! She jumped, startled at both my volume and tone. Someone is just playing a twisted prank. Nothing at the scene indicates a break-in. I don't appreciate being sent on a wild goose chase, Doctor. She was stunned at my bluntness.
Excuse me.
There is clear evidence that no one broke in. You just jumped to conclusions and sent me on a pointless investigation when we have bodies piling up. The boss made no move to respond, and instead just nodded, turning back to whatever she was doing. So, she just wanted to waste my time. Great. I storm out of the building and into my car, fuming and practically foaming at the mouth. All I could think is that she did that to me on purpose, because she thought I was the one who didn't lock up. But then I thought to myself, she looked to be just as confused as I was when I confronted her. Did she really not know that it wasn't a break-in? I get a call on my cell. "Oliver," I answer.
Come back inside, Oliver. I want to speak with you.
As much as I wanted to shout at her, I agreed and went back to her office. She was still sitting at her desk, as professional as ever.
I don't entirely understand why you stormed out like that. However, I cannot deny that you are frustrated. I did my own investigation and you are right. It does look like a setup.
She admitted I was right. That never happens. What is she playing at? I cautiously lean against the door frame. So now what? She shrugs.
This is out of my hands, Oliver. It's on you to find the culprit.
I sigh. Fine, I'm on it. I leave her office. There was no way I was taking this as a legit case. However, I did head to another detective's office so I could give them a heads up. I enter the office of Detective Isaac Wards.
How can I help you, detective?
There has been an incident in the coroner's office down the hall.
Ah, yes, I heard about that. I'll look into it.
Alright, thank you. Before I could leave, Detective Wards stopped me.
Oh, Detective Oliver, be on your guard.
I was confused at this, but I brushed it off as one detective looking out for another and left for the day. I'll have to leave it there for now. I will send out the next recording when I can. This is Lucy Oliver, signing off. For now.